What's happening, people? Back at it again. Back at it again. Whoa! Throughout these series, I have noticed a couple of sections that I found very interesting. The 25th dynasty, love it. Black people, Negroes from Nubia went into Egypt, was like, nah, yeah, no. That ain't what it do. Took over Egypt. After the 25th dynasty, all kinds of foreigners start coming in and stuff just got weird. Then it got normalized and the culture changed. It wasn't just African, it wasn't just black culture. It started to become European culture. It started to become Greek culture. And of course, the Persians took over at one point, and some other cultures who had vast resources to have a big army, they took over as well. But within and around all the chaos, there were some good things that happened. Like, for instance, when it comes to the Greeks, we all heard about the Ptolemies. They were directly and indirectly responsible for certain innovations, like the lighthouse. They created the lighthouse. Now, I don't know if it was because this was their own thing that they conjured up, or were they inspired by something else they saw, but they brought it to the mainstream. So I give them credit for that. The first library, they finished the library. Nice. And they had a lot of other innovations. But as a society, as a culture, they were directly inspired by Africans, specifically by Egypt. And there's more than just one type of black person that lived in Egypt, because remember, the Cushites, the Nubians, also were going back and forth to Egypt. In fact, when it came to a lot of the skirmishes that they had, they would enlist Nubian bowmen to help them out. So Egypt had a working relationship with the Nubians, with Sudan. And like I said, in the 25th century, when the Nubians found out what was going on in Egypt, they squared up and went to handle their business. You're not going to come in here. You're not going to run this place into the ground. That's not what it do. So yes, I have to say, yeah, my favorite part so far is about the 25th dynasty. And not only did they go in there and set things right, but the women also had important part to play in it. Not just the queens, but the princesses too. One of the king's sister had a position in the royal court. She was an important person. So black women had positions of authority and power. They didn't have to go run back and check in with the husband all the time. I mean, it helps. Hey, I'm getting ready to do this. I got so and so doing that. Just so they'll be on the same page. But she was able to make decisions on her own. She ran her department the way she felt best. Black women have never had a problem getting respect from black men up until recent history, because they listen to the outside voices. These people from other cultures, they telling you do this, do that. Oh, that's degrading. You're a woman. You shouldn't have to take that. But then they going home to their husbands. He said he on his way home. What's for dinner? Oh yeah, I thought about cooking steak today. Meanwhile, you chopping up hot dogs, mashed potatoes, and whatever you can find in the cupboard. Because some woman then told you, oh, that's slavery, girl. You don't need to deal with that shit. But she going home to her husband. And then what makes it even more insulting is that some of them is taking your man. Well, it's not my fault that you don't know how to treat your man. What you mean? What do you mean? Because you fell for the okie doke. It is what it is. Sis, you fell for the okie doke. We need you. We're stronger together than we are apart. We need you. But right now, you fighting us. You fighting your own people. You fighting the men of your own culture, of your own race. Like, really? And you going in hard. You helping the enemy break us down. So in the end, when it comes to that great conflict that's coming, who's going to protect you? Who's going to stand by your side? You think all those foreign women, those women from other cultures, from other races, is going to stand by your side? They might sympathize with you. But hey, during slavery, there was a lot of white people that sympathized with the black people that were enslaved. But they weren't about to give up what they had to support blacks. They'd rather stay silent. And that's just as bad as the people that was beating us down and enslaving us. You see the injustice, but you ain't gonna do nothing about it. Well, there's nothing I can do. That's not my fight. It ain't got nothing to do with me. But I'm a human being. I'm a human being, and you're not gonna help me. But you'll go halfway across the world and help some poor, undernourished kids. Meanwhile, you putting whole black families out in the street in America. You want black people to rise up and go to war for you, with you, across the world, all in the name of freedom. These people have been just tortured and belittled and dehumanized, and they need help. So everybody's cheering for America. Hey, yeah, Americans. But then you come back home and you treat us like shit. You got our women fighting against us. That ain't right. So now that I got that off my chest, let's get into today's episode. The Cleopatra family. That's where we left off, learning that the Ptolemies had more than one Cleopatra. There was a Queen Cleopatra. There was a niece of the queen named Cleopatra, and in a later generation, there was another Cleopatra. Where this name originated from, I do not know. Sorry about that. Now, where were we? Oh, back to the show.
No legitimate heir. And the one who winds up on the throne is the man we call Ptolemy the 12th, right? Now, he is called by himself Neos Dionysius. That's what he calls himself. He's the new Dionysius. It is a kind of, he's saying, you know, that's my god now. That's my patron deity. This is not what the people of Alexandria called him. Right? He had two nicknames. Now, first, he was illegitimate, so he is called the bastard by the people of Alexandria. He is also called Oletus, which means the flute player, and it's really derogatory. The idea was that he did indeed play the flute. He's sort of like the Greek equivalent of Nero, you know, and his fiddle. He played the flute and didn't really govern the country, so they called him a flute player. You'll see a lot of sort of comparisons, by the way, with the Ptolemies and the Romans. You know, for example, it starts to sound a little bit like I, Claudius, you know, everybody killing everyone. There are a lot of similarities. But anyway, Ptolemy 12 is on the throne. This sort of illegitimate child who plays the flute. Now, let's think about the times. Greece is no longer the only superpower in town. There is an even stronger power at this time, Rome. The Greeks, it's a very interesting situation between Greece and Rome. The Greeks view the Romans as uncultured, uncouth, and there's some reason for this. Rome is a superpower, and the reason it's a superpower is it has an army. I mean, go back to our ancient Egyptian civilization when the pharaohs like Thutmose III, Ramses the Great, rode out with the army. They had a disciplined, standing army. That's why Rome is a superpower. They are disciplined. If you remember, I mentioned it once, that we get the word decimate from the Roman army. When their commanders thought that the men hadn't fought bravely, that they had been cowardly, 1 in 10 was taken and executed. So 1 in 10 became decimated. Right? These Roman soldiers were disciplined, professionals. That's why Rome is a power. Now, it's a military power, which gives it economic clout. But that's different from saying that it's cultured. See, we tend to think of Rome as a seat of culture. It wasn't always like that. It wasn't. Compared to Alexandria, Rome was a small city of mud houses, mud brick houses. They didn't live in palaces made of alabaster and marble. No. They hadn't learned yet how to be great. And as a matter of fact, you know, when you see Rome today, that's Rome of a little bit later period. These are not yet, you know, Romans aren't yet really cultured. Now, the Greeks looked down on the Romans, even though the Romans are the superpower. But this was a problem for the later Ptolemies and for our Ptolemy the 12th. It's a problem. They had to pander. The Ptolemies had to pander to the Romans. Remember we had Physicon, Fatty, being run off, right? And you have others being murdered? Well, the Ptolemies, to stay on the throne, so the people wouldn't attack them, paid the Romans. Because the Romans had the army. So the idea was you gave money to Rome, they would keep you on the throne. Now, why would they keep you on the throne? Rome wanted the constant wheat flowing into Rome. They needed Egypt's wheat to feed Rome. And there's a phrase that's used in the history books all the time, and it's accurate. Egypt became the breadbasket of Rome.
I've heard
so the
of
Romans
that.
had this interest in Egypt. They wanted to keep a strong ruler on the throne so they could do business with him, so they could get the grain. The Ptolemies were weak at the end, so they paid Rome to keep them on the throne. It was a kind of mutual symbiotic thing. But Think about what Alexandria was now. Place of culture, learning, right? Ptolemy 1 and 2 had built the library. We have this beacon, the Pharaoh's lighthouse, shining out. The kings live in marble palaces in splendor. And the Greeks love this. They love it. 300,000 Greeks. But they're not the only ones in Alexandria. Alexandria is really divided into 3 segments. There are Jews, a large collection of Jews who are the merchants doing business in Alexandria. And there's another section, the Egyptian section. We call it a quarter, but it's thirds. It's the Egyptian section. Now the Greeks, these cultured, viewing themselves as top of the world, but no longer do they have an army that can really do stuff. And you got their ruler, a Ptolemy something, Ptolemy 10, Ptolemy 9. And that ruler is pandering to these boorish Romans. So the Greeks who are living in Alexandria despise the later Ptolemies. They despise them. And for the Ptolemies to stay on, they have to deal with the Romans. So it's a terrible, vicious cycle. And it's going to cause real problems. Real problems. We know a little bit about Ptolemy XII's early reign. We have a stela, those great sources of information, those carved stones that endure. And one of the things we know is that he took a kind of family trip to Memphis. To Memphis, the old capital, right? One Ptolemy who finally got out of Alexandria and did something, went to Memphis, taking his children with him. And he's got children, right? He's got plenty of children. He's got Bernike, oldest girl. There's another girl, Cleopatra. She's Cleopatra 6. There's another daughter who's another Cleopatra. That's Cleopatra 7. That's our Cleopatra. That's Elizabeth Taylor. That's the one who becomes the famous Cleopatra.
2 Cleopatras in the same family. I still want to know, where did they get the name from? Was it classic Greek name, or was it borrowed from the Egyptian people? I mean, they did take over Egypt and change some things, so if they change the name of the gods to suit their culture, why wouldn't they take a well-known Egyptian girl's name and change it to a Greek pronunciation or whatever? I don't know how it went down, but I'm just saying, I'm curious to know, where did the name Cleopatra first come from? I'm not sure that the professor's going to bring that up, but that's very interesting. I really would like to know that for clarity.
And there are 2 half-brothers, 2 Ptolemies, and Cleopatra has a younger sister, Arsinoe. So it's a busy household. The palace is full. And on this stela, we hear that Ptolemy 12 Dionysius took the family to Memphis. And it says on the stela, and this is important, it says, and we saw both sides of the river. In other words, they're looking at everything, right? They're not just looking at one side, they're looking at the other. Now, what could they have seen? Right? Think back. What do you think would have been the main attraction around Memphis if you're going on a sort of royal tour? And imagine the Clintons going on a tour of someplace. What would they have been shown? Well, one place for sure is they would have been shown the Serapeum, the burial place of the sacred Apis bull. Right? They would have been shown that. Now, let's think about our Cleopatra, because she's going to be the one who features very important in the future. This is a time, she's a kid, not even a teenager yet at this time, probably. And she's taken into this subterranean chamber where probably the whole family is together looking at, and they can't read the inscriptions. They spoke Greek. And some priest is guiding them, telling them what it is. And she's hearing Egyptian also spoken in the background. And she sees these sarcophagi of the Apis bulls, and his incense undoubtedly. And it's in a darkened tunnel. It must have been an incredible impression. Incredible. Now this young girl is going to grow up to be the only Ptolemy to speak Egyptian. You know? And it may be just this kind of impression that what urges her, pushes her on to learn this language of the Egyptians. And even maybe she becomes infatuated with the religion itself. So we know that this flute player, the bastard, took his family to Memphis, where they saw various sights. Undoubtedly, the Serapeum. Now, Rome, the superpower, is a republic. Right? They don't have kings. Rome doesn't have kings now. They are ruled by a senate, a large senate. It's a representative government, at least in principle. But now we get a new invention of the Roman government, the triumvirate. The Roman government invents the triumvirate. It's a panel of three men who are really ruling Rome, right? Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar.
Why does that name sound familiar?
So we've got three men ruling Rome. Ptolemy the 12th makes a deal. He wants to make a deal. He wants to make sure he stays on the throne. And he knows he's weak. So he tells them basically the triumvirate, right? He deals with Pompey, Caesar, whoever's there. And he says, you keep me on the throne, I will pay you. And a deal is cut eventually. The deal is something like this. He will give them virtually the entire income of Egypt for a year. Tremendous amount to keep him on the throne.
So, even back then, they were doing dirty deals in the halls of Congress. Now, this guy is supposed to be the leader, the president. And in order to stay in power, he has to pay the other country, the Romans. He has to pay them because they're the only ones that have a strong enough army to stop any invasion. Wow. So do you think it's possible that type of what's the word I'm looking for? Back alley deals are still being done today? That people in Congress have no idea what the hell they're doing, but the perks of the job, the notoriety, all the stuff that comes with that job, all the power and influence, they're willing to cut deals with other politicians, with foreign politicians, just to keep their seat in Congress. I think so. What do you think?
Now, when he goes back, right, remember the Greeks hate the Romans, don't like their ruler pandering to Rome. He's got to raise taxes. He's got to pay the debt. So he raises taxes, thereby infuriating the Greeks. Right? So much so that he is run out of town. They run him out of town. And where does he run? Naturally, to Rome. Who becomes the ruler? We've got the children back in the palace, remember? We've got a young Cleopatra. We've got a older Cleopatra. We've got Bernice. We've got Arsinoe. We've got two young boys, half-brothers. The one who takes the power is Bernike, the oldest sister, the oldest of the sisters. She seizes the throne. Now, a woman seizing the throne, it couldn't have happened in Greece. Couldn't have happened in Greece. In a sense, and let me get ahead of my story, Cleopatra, the great Cleopatra, Cleopatra 7, couldn't have been Cleopatra in Greece. If you think about it, we don't know the names of very many Greek queens, but we sure know Egyptian queens. Remember, starting with the 18th dynasty, women start to become powerful. Right? We don't hear about women much in the Middle Kingdom, the Old Kingdom. But in the 18th dynasty, we get somebody like Hatshepsut becoming king. We get Queen Tai influencing her son. We get powerful women. This is an Egyptian phenomenon. Egyptian. And remember, perhaps the most powerful of all of the gods, in a sense, is Isis. She's the one who interacts and has the power, and she's the goddess of magic. So, when a Greek woman seizes the throne in Egypt, there is a precedent. We've got strong women, and that's something that you will see in the future. Bernike takes the throne. Now, what I wonder about, and I'm always thinking about Cleopatra 7, my Cleopatra, because she's the really interesting one, as you'll see. What is she thinking at this point? She's living in the palace with two older sisters. Bernike has seized the throne. Got two younger brothers there too. Got a younger sister, Arsinoe. What's she thinking? Well, one of the things I think she's thinking is, am I going to stay alive? Because we know that the Ptolemies have this horrible history of killing their brothers, sisters, mothers, everybody. And she, in a sense, is a threat to the throne just because she's royal and just because she's alive. Bernike is on the throne, but she doesn't have a husband. And the Ptolemies required that they come in pairs. It was a tradition. Usually you married your sister. She needs a husband. It's required. She marries a cousin, right? He's boorish. Marries him, though, and has him strangled the next week, right? It doesn't last long. But Bernike's pretty strong. I mean, she's something to be reckoned with. Anyway, she finds a husband, a friend of hers, literally a friend, and marries him. And now we have a royal couple. So now there's Bernike ruling with her friend as her husband. What's going to happen? Cleopatra at this time, teenager, right? Teenager. What was her life like? Right? She's worried, of course. But also remember, she's growing up in luxury. She's living in a palace, probably the greatest building on earth right now.
So wait a minute. Whoa. Let's back this train up a little bit. Just a wee bit. Cleopatra's older sister took the throne. That makes her queen of Egypt. Okay. So she marries her cousin. Didn't want to marry her brother. Ew. I guess that's how she felt. Can't get mad at him. So she marries her cousin. Now, we all know, we've heard stories, even as late as the founding of America, where you have families that marry their cousins. Don't act like you ain't never heard that. So, this chick becomes queen, marries her cousin, and has him killed a week later? Like, damn. And then she turns around and marries her friend. Her bestie, I guess. Who does that? What woman would take somebody out the friend zone to marry them, to keep her power, to keep all the stuff that she didn't acquire? Look, I need a big favor from you. I need you to marry me. What? Yeah, I need you to marry me. You know, I got all this stuff going on, and they're going to take all my shit. if I ain't got no husband? I mean, fellas, would you do that? If a female friend zones you, here's my question for today. If a female friend zones you and then come back sometime later asking you to marry them in order for them to keep their shit, all the stuff that they done built over the years financially,